Dawn Porter is the director behind two big political documentaries this year, John Lewis' Good Trouble and The Way I See It, which is about the White House photographer Pete Souza. I'm Kevin Jacobsen of Gold Derby here with Dawn. And just to speak generally, before we dive deeper, what was it that made you particularly interested in telling the stories of John Lewis and Pete Souza?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Love Gold
Mhm.
Derby. John Lewis, he had done a great interview for me in the series I made about Bobby Kennedy. And he told a story that I'd never heard about volunteering for Bobby Kennedy. And when he told that story, I started thinking there's so much more to this particular legislator that we don't know. And, there can be a danger when you have someone who's as well known in some circles as John Lewis that you can forget all the things that they've done, and you can forget how important they are to our country. But I think also being in year 2.5 of the Trump presidency, I really was interested in something to give me hope and to feel like it really still was the country that I knew. And so, being immersed in a story of a person who came from such humble beginnings, who was such an empathetic, caring person as John Lewis, like that was really, it was just really kind of revived me to sink into that story. And then I love archive and like swimming around in that and finding cool stuff. That was great. And then, so I was like 2/3 done with John Lewis movie. And then the producers of Pete Souza movie, came and wanted to talk to me. It was Laura Dern and Evan Hayes and Jamie Lemons, Laura's producing partner. And, I kind of had no business to do starting another movie at that time, but I just kind of couldn't resist. Pete came into the office and showed us his photos, and he just flipped open a laptop and started paging through photos and telling stories. And it was such a simple thing that it was really, but so compelling, even just the way he just kind of flipped open the laptop, that I thought, yeah, I want to go through this ride. Like, I want to know that it wasn't all a dream, that there could be, an empathetic, caring leader. Plus my dad was a photographer. And so I started in photography, and I just I do have a love for the, peculiarities of photographers who can be a kind of interesting bunch. So it just felt like it also like the movies speak to each other for me. Like John Lewis was saying, say something, get in the way. And that's exactly what Pete was doing. So it just really felt like such a natural, transition, something to go to next. So I love working on them together.
Yeah. And what I found interesting about the John Lewis documentary, to start there, the way the film is structured, where you're covering his early days and then you also cover, his more present day, and you're kind of jumping back and forth. It's not really told in a chronological way. You're going back and forth between past and present and sort of seeing how they inform each other in a way, and how things haven't changed very much in some regards, and in some cases they have. But can you talk about the decision to present the film in that way?
Yeah, it's exactly what you just said. And so I'm so glad that that was coming through. Is I'm really interested in the question of what motivates people and in all of their acts, their public acts. And so for John Lewis, I thought, like, it's interesting, of course, to know the history, but it's like another layer of interest to me to understand how his early career as a civil rights activist, leaving his small town and joining a movement, that's such a radical thing to do, and how that spirit of the radical remained with him even when he entered the halls of power. So, to understand John Lewis, you have to know his beginning, to know what he would do in Congress, that he would speak not only for African Americans, but all minorities, for our gay citizens, for women, for immigrants, that he just had a spirit of always wanting to uplift, people that haven't always traditionally had political power, but also have, been literally in danger in this country. And he just, continued to look for areas where he could help. So I thought like his past really, really informed his present, and I wanted to examine that.
Yeah, and I like how you had John Lewis in a room looking back on the old footage and old pictures, and like he's been in the public eye for decades, so I think a lot of people know what he's done. They know his story to a certain extent, but was there anything that you discovered about him that you may not have known before, just in the process of filming and his commentary on the past and all that?
I think that John Lewis is so well known and he's given so many speeches. And, the challenge for any documentarian is, how do you put somebody in a physical place for their interview where they can access memory and where they can, kind of go deeper and tell you things that they haven't really talked about so much. So we were traveling with the congressman when he was visiting a museum, Bryan Stevenson Civil Rights Museum. And I watched him watching footage of himself. And he shook his head and he said, "I can't believe that's me." And then he started telling the story about the day, and he turns to this teenager next to him, and he tells a story about the footage that we were all watching that I'd never heard before. And it just gave me the idea, which, to tell you the truth, like I had no idea if it was going to work or not. I was like, either it's going to work or it's going to be terribly embarrassing and very expensive. But it turned out, for him, giving him the opportunity to, when he was in his Capitol Hill office, he was always running to vote. So he was kind of distracted. And when he was at home, he was very much a Southern gentleman who was worried that he had a messy house. So like for him, I was like, he's got to get out of his normal spaces. So we constructed these 3 large screens and then really projected archival, no narration movie of his life. And then I just said, tell me the story, because no one could tell his story better than he could. And so I think for him, it was just a matter of finding the right place to put him in to tell us his story. And he did it so beautifully.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's this quote he says in the film where he says, "You only pass this way once.
Oh,
You gotta give it all you can." And with his death in July, it was such a significant loss, and I feel like this film takes on an added resonance. And the election being the way it turned out, with his district really coming out in full force and voting blue, I have to ask, just how do you think that he would have felt about all the work that was put into really making some change in Georgia this past year and for many years leading up to this point, all of that paying
yeah.
off in a way?
One of the best things I've ever filmed was 2018 election night, when he let us stay with him to see the house turn blue. And I had watched him campaign so energetically for, first time candidates with no profile whatsoever. And he traveled around the country doing that. So seeing his joy in that, House first time candidates coming into office, but also, at the end of his life, he made a point to go down and stand in front of the Black Lives Matter art installation in Washington, D.C. And I think he did that for a number of reasons, but I know because he said that he was extremely proud of America for showing up and for speaking up. And so, as tragic and terrible his death was for so many people, I really take a lot of joy in knowing that in the end, he saw hundreds of thousands of people, you know, join together to say, like, this is actually who we are. And I know that that pleased him so much, and he he kind of felt not vindicated, but he felt like I knew it all along. And that was really, really meaningful.
Well, moving over to the way I see it, Pete Souza, very interesting subject with how close he was to President Obama and the way he sees the contrast in Trump's behavior. And, you know, it may come across as like a partisan thing on the surface, but what it's really about is decency and, you know, dignity. And I'm just curious what discussions you had about approaching it from that angle and trying not to make it just like a nice slideshow, but to really have something to say about his work.
Yeah, I love these questions, by the way.
Thank
Because you're really
you.
good. Um, uh, you know, we had a number of discussions with Pete. The first conversation, first he didn't want it to be about him. He was like, "This is not my story. This has nothing to do with me. It's just about decency and like, you know, it's just about the president and both presidents and what, you know, what the job entails and how serious it is." The first thing he said to me was, "I want it to be more intimate portrait than shade." And to tell you the truth, I was in the mood for shade. And also, like, you know, like every documentarian, I don't like to be told what to do. But, you know, in thinking about it, we tried many different versions, particularly of openings, some that had more Trump in them than others. And those versions didn't work. They were not anything you would want to watch because we were living it. So the biggest challenge I had with Pete was convincing him that his evolution into a person speaking up was also something important to say, that he literally could not be a fly on the wall anymore, that some things are too important. So I do think President Obama was a good president, but I think the much bigger lesson is, because it's not a policy movie. There's many things I disagree with President Obama on, many things I disagree, many, many more things I disagree with President Reagan on. But um, the sanctity and adherence to a basic set of norms is something that both presidents could agree on. And I think we are seeing, you know, I see the movie even so much differently in just the few days since Biden has been elected. I feel like I've exhaled, you know, I feel like um, I'm sure there are going to be things that I support President Biden on and some things that I disagree as a citizen. Um, but I'll know I'll have a voice. I know that there's some things that I can count on. Like, I do not think he will be a fundamentally dishonest person. And I think that he will have empathy, and whatever decisions he comes to, I know that they will be carefully considered. And in the end, that's a big thing, you know, that maybe we took for granted, that people would be working really hard to do, to make the best decisions given all the facts that they know. So,
Well, with the amount of photos he took, I feel like so many of them do tell their own story. Obviously, you had the Situation Room photo, very iconic, the Hair Like Mine photo, some of clearly the more famous ones, but there's so many behind the scenes ones that aren't as well known. So is there anything you can recall from those that you just really fought to include in the film for a certain reason?
um, you know, so we had a fantastic, so interestingly, Jessica Congdon is the editor of both movies. And so we both had the experience of going from one to the next, and we work really well together. I just adore her, and she's so talented. You know, we all had certain favorite photos, but what Jess and I did is we came up with themes that we wanted to amplify. So leadership, compassion, crisis, empathy, you know, were some of our main themes. And so from there, we had a second editor, Ben Zweig, and he got all the books. He got both Shade books, Intimate Portrait, Pete's earlier book of Obama in the Senate. And we kind of tabbed those books and then made huge bins of photos. So we got it down from tens of thousands to just like a couple thousand, and then kept, going from there. And then we brought Pete into the process and said, okay, these are the photos we're thinking about. And he was like, oh, I like this one better for that reason, or that one better. So, but we kept swapping the photos in and out until almost the very end, because they do tell such a story. When you take that many photos, they almost have the feeling of footage. And so they actually worked with the footage a lot more seamlessly. At first I was worried about that. Like, how do you make a film about still photos without it feeling like a slideshow? So the photos had to be part of a larger context. They had to be part of a larger story about, big ideas like compassion and how important it is to be able to have a president who's a consoler in chief. I mean, like, that's not the first thing you think of when you think of a president, but it is something I will always think of now, is how critical it is to have somebody you trust, and who is respectful of the citizenry in times of crisis.
Absolutely. And just really quick in the last minute or so here, looking at the future, you're directing a series for Apple TV Plus, working with Oprah and Prince Harry about mental illness. Is there anything that you can say about that, how that's going?
Um, I am so proud of this series. I think Oprah and Prince Harry have done an incredible thing in using their, um, fame and influence to give people permission to talk about something that is so prevalent in our society. Of course, we could not have known that the entire world would be experiencing mental anxiety. But the series really, kind of tells stories of people in so many different circumstances who are so brave. Some of them are well known, some of them are not well known. But our animating principle for that series has been everybody has a story. Everybody has experienced some kind of, mental wellness challenge, or a loved one has experienced that. And so hopefully there's something to see of yourself or people you love. There's something for everybody in it. And I think it is also a series that hopefully will bring people together and hope to improve our understanding of part of our human condition that is so fundamental.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Well, thank you so much, Dawn, for talking to us today. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, nice to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, and for those of you watching now, hit like and subscribe for more award season interviews, and head to goldderby.com to make all kinds of predictions, including the Oscars.